All right, let's talk about the police investigation, the tactics, and some of the things we can figure from what police have said. Attorney Pete Schulte is a former police officer trained in tactical operations and still works as a reserve officer. Pete, I think the most interesting thing that happened here today, and Clarice talked about it in her piece as well, is the movement that happened from the FBI. The agent on the scene changed what he'd been saying. He said initially, I know what you're going to ask. You're going to ask if it's terrorism, and we don't know. And then late this afternoon and this evening, and I think this is important, FBI agents don't just start flapping their gums for anything. He says, we don't know for sure, but we are definitely making some movements that is a possibility. So that's important.
It is important. So what that means is, and we're talking about the FBI, who routinely does not give out a lot of information, right? We're not going to comment.
Right.
So in this particular case, I think what they're doing is, and what they're doing as part of the investigation is they're expanding from the two people that were killed. They're going to their residences, they're going to people that they know, and what that is telling me is the FBI is learning things about their background, learning things about who they are, if they're United States citizens or what forth, that is going to move them in the direction that they need to expand their investigation.
They've already moved, don't you think? They were, here's terrorism, here's not at all. In the middle is where they were saying, and now something has pushed them over there.
I agree, and so what they're now going to do is they're going to bring in other federal entities in to try to look at this and figure out, is this a broader, I don't want to throw things out like ISIS and other things, but they want to see if they can connect that to any other groups. And if they can dispel it, they'll do it. If they can't, we're hoping that, this, like we talked about before the show, this was not a target that you would expect terrorism. It doesn't make sense.
Let me ask you about that. Shooters were killed, two, in a black SUV, wearing tactical gear, one male, one female. Mean anything to you?
No, or
does it just continue that?
It continues that dial. It doesn't make sense because here, most shootings that we have that are going to be, we'll talk about workplace violence or domestic terrorism, where people have a target. They want to go in somewhere because they have a personal reason to do so. In these type of cases, in this case, we don't have that. We have multiple shooters. They get in, they get out, and I think what we're learning is when they found out they got that tip at the nearby city, I think it was Redlands. Yep. They have a police scanner. I think it's very clear because they knew that the police were heading over there, and then they left, just like they knew to leave the building.
Okay, the police and the feds have been keeping us updated with news conferences from the scene. We spliced together some of those statements from earlier today and this evening. Let's listen to those now if we can.
Information that I think is probably the most reliable at this point is that the suspects have fled, potentially in a dark-colored SUV. We do not have any identification on who those suspects are. We do not know what the motive is for the shooting at this point.
The only thing I know is there were shots fired, officers were involved, and there is a suspect down. Whether it's related or not, we don't know yet.
We had multiple officers that were involved in the shooting. We have two suspects that are dead at the scene. One is a male, one is a female.
This is a marathon, not a sprint. I know one of the big questions that will come up repeatedly is this terrorism? And I am still not willing to say that we know that for sure.
But then he went on to say
later
things are moving them toward that. There are some reports out. LA Times said that reported that this was triggered by an argument or an altercation at this Christmas party that was going on. The police said they knew there was some altercation at the Christmas party, knew that somebody at the party left, but they didn't know if that ended up being one of the shooters. All right, so an altercation at a Christmas party, they go get tactical geared up, they get bombs, they get AR-15 type rifles, and they come back and shoot. Yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely not. There's no way that if somebody got in an altercation at a party that they were going to be able to leave, at least get one or two other people involved, get dressed in tactical gear, get their bombs together to go back and shoot up the place. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
So you don't think there might have been an argument, you don't think one...
I think what happened is people were calling 911 because they, maybe this will help. Right, and it was a very fluid situation. All afternoon we were talking about this, and the information kept coming in, it kept getting dispelled, and I tell you, we're all going to be very surprised when we find out the truth.
And let's go to that. Let's finish with that. What are you excited to hear about? What do you want to know? What are you waiting for? You probably sit there and think, oh, when we find this out, we'll know that all the house of cards will come down. What do you want to know?
And I hate to say this, but when we find out the names of the people that were involved and where they're from, if they're from the United States, then I think we can put this back into a situation where it's just like every other mass shooting that we've had, way too often in this country. If they're from overseas, if they're non-citizens, and information starts to come up that they're on Facebook,
watch lists or something
correct,
worse, you know.
And I think that's a big indicator. Is once they know who these people are, and they start to go back and look at social media, I think that's part of the information that's driving the FBI to saying we're not sure yet.
Okay, Pete Schulte, thanks for coming in. Appreciate
Absolutely.
the insight.
All right, there are still many questions about the shooting today. We have more on this story on our website, fox4news.com. We're also going to bring you updates throughout this newscast, Fox 4 News at 9, and later on Fox 4 News at 10.